Hey, welcome to Overtime, where we take Sunday's message further. My name is Jeremy, and I'm your host. And this is a podcast where we just want to ask the questions that we think that you would ask as it relates to Sunday's message. And as we do so, we hope that it helps you grow in your life and your faith. With that being said, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date on all of the podcasts that are coming out. Not only that, hit the like button, because when you do so, it helps us help other people. And if you ever have a question about Sunday's content or about Overtime, you can submit those to overtime@npaustin.com, and we will be sure to get to those in future podcasts. So with that being said, here's a quick recap of Sunday, and then we're going to jump into our conversation today.
We're going to ask ourselves this morning is what needs to be different in order for things to actually be different. Malachi says this, "For I hate divorce, says the Lord, the God of Israel." To divorce your wife is to overwhelm her with cruelty, says the Lord of heaven's armies. So guard your heart. Do not be unfaithful to your wife. God does hate divorce. He does not hate divorced people, but we have all experienced the pain of broken relationships, even if it wasn't in the context of divorce. And this is Isaiah speaking and foreshadowing of Jesus. By his wounds, we are healed. If by his wounds, all of humanity is reconciled to God, what can God do through what has hurt you? The evaluation and application of your experience, knowledge, and time is what actually changes things. To have a different relationship, you're gonna have to do things differently. What needs to be different so things can actually be different?
So we wrapped up the series this Sunday.
Yes, it's done. 5 love handles, 5 weeks of love handles.
Yeah, and you did 2 of them.
I did. It's
2 of the easy ones.
Yes, the easiest ones.
Yep.
How to not repeat mistakes and repeat patterns and
brokenness and
then, wives submit to your husband, which is really not the message. I just keep calling it that just because I think that's funnier.
Yep.
But yes, mutual submission about how we can be on each other's team.
At least you didn't have to do the sex message though.
I really enjoyed Jordan having to do that, like to just that whole process, like his message prep, his, and I'm actually watching you a little bit, like, because you're going to share this Sunday.
Yeah.
And so like I love when I get to see other people take very seriously their topics and really put a lot of energy and effort into it. Now yours is definitely different than Jordan.
Yeah, I mean we are doing a 180 degree turn this
total
week.
different topic. Yeah, but I do think I did, and Jordan did a great job. In fact, I think at Inside Out this past Sunday, we had an open Q&A with students, and there were about 5 questions that were about what does the Bible say about physical intimacy or sex, or what are boundaries, and and some really good questions that teenagers are asking about what does this mean and what does God really think about me, and we just basically said, hey, for these 4 or 5 questions, because there were like 30 questions, these 4 or 5, we're just going to make you watch Jordan's message. He did a great job. Yeah. Great job. And I've actually used it in conversations about things outside of just the topic of physical intimacy. Like I had a conversation the other day with someone about it in terms of food, like how we misshape food and our relationship with food. Like, obviously God intended us to eat and intended us to enjoy eating because we have taste buds, but like I use the candle thing. Yep. But when it's not in its proper container, it causes all sorts of chaos in our lives.
Food is fuel.
Yep. So anyway, yes, great job, great 5 weeks, and then you're going to start. Is it another several week series? And so it's all on you next week. No big deal.
Yeah. Well, luckily it's spring break, so everybody leaves and goes out of town.
And it's daylight savings time. Wait a minute.
Yeah.
It's all that at once.
So, pretty much nobody's going to be there.
So all 5 people, no, because I asked people to raise their hand if they were going out of town spring break, and very few people did.
Okay.
I'm not, remember?
I do remember. I'm sorry.
I'm going out of town, and so is my wife, and neither of us raised our hand. I don't know. I have a weird thing about that in church.
Raising your hand in church?
We should unpack that.
Yeah, I don't know. I just wasn't ready to do it.
Well, okay, yeah, because it's a big deal to say you're going somewhere spring break. I do, no, but that's great. That's great for you. I'm glad your reservation worked out well.
I'm more excitedly, no, not more excitedly. In other news,
okay.
I don't know if you know this, but I'm a huge Ted Lasso fan.
And it starts this week.
A week from today.
It's a week from today? Okay, I was wondering when is it the whole season's going to drop, or is it one episode a week?
No, one episode at a time. Just like old times. Just the way it should be done.
Yes. Now, how did you feel about how it ended before we took this little break?
Well, so
I want to be careful because I really don't want to endorse the show on this podcast because the show is like really good, but it also has a lot of...
It's an adult show.
It's a very adult show.
Yeah.
Like I don't really want any students to watch it or anything like that. But what's really cool about the show is just like Ted Lasso could be a lesson in like culture and leadership.
Absolutely.
You know, just the way he loves his team and the way he cares about people and builds trust and all that. It's just, that's what's super cool to watch. But also in like father wounds, like season 2 with Nate's father wound that he has, and how he projects that onto Ted Lasso, and then how that comes out in the very end. Like for me, I just rewatched both seasons.
I had forgotten about that till you just mentioned it.
Yeah, like to me, I was just like, oh my gosh, there it is. Like that has nothing to do with Ted Lasso. That has everything to do with Nate and his dad.
Yeah,
and the brokenness there. And now he's trying to, you know, I'm excited. I think it's gonna be. I'm excited to see how the story. I think this is going to be the last season, so I'm interested to see how it ends. Yep.
Yeah, I really loved it. We watched all the episodes. There were 2 episodes that I felt like didn't need to exist.
Yep.
And one was a Christmas one.
Yep.
That I was like,
and then the Coach Beard one.
Which I love him as a character. So anyway, but I'd forgotten about that.
Yeah. The only thing I don't like about the episode, going back to relationships or the series, is just the way that Ted Lasso's relationship ends.
With
in the first season with his wife.
Yeah.
It's just like, what?
There was no unpacking of that.
No.
You could tell,
and this great guy, right?
Yes. Yes, he is. No, I don't want to hurt you and your soul with your Ted Lasso.
Yeah. Well, Grayson has a shirt that says "Believe," like the yellow Believe sign.
I love Believe. So I love the goldfish principle. I love everything he does. In fact, there's just so many moments in which he handles. He is. I read a book once called Unoffendable.
Yeah.
And this book was just all about like being able to navigate life without taking an offense.
Right.
And for me, that's like literally one of the greatest characteristics of Christ. Mm-hmm. Like Jesus has just had so many moments to be so offended. And he was honest and real and spoke, sometimes harshly, but it did not ever come across, at least from what I can read, like offended. Right. And so Ted Lasso is unoffendable.
Right.
And I love the way he navigates that. However, like when I was watching that, like, ending via Skype or Zoom, like they end their marriage basically via across continents, right? Or, you know, across the ocean. And I was like, there's so much more there we don't know. Like, I don't know that it's fair to be like, she's crazy because she left a great guy. That, you know, since we are talking about relationships, I've never had an instance where truly when I got to work with a couple, it truly came out of nowhere like that, right? Like things are always building, they're growing, you know, you can see this happening, like, it's not like And
clearly he's so broken. I mean, he's got like panic attacks and stuff.
Yes. Yep. There's lots of layers to Ted Lasso. It's a pretty complex show.
It really is.
Yes.
Beautifully written.
So good. Everything is so good. I love it.
Yep.
Well, he sorry not to continue this conversation on any farther than it needs to be, but he like projects his wounds in the way of being like really overly nice. Right. Yeah, like that's how he like stuffs it.
Like a people pleasing kind of thing.
Yeah. But then also it is what's funny, and I think what you maybe mean a little bit by you don't want to endorse the show is like all of these they're like one step away from Jesus in so many areas.
Oh, yeah.
But then there's like the crossroads that's like, okay, am I going to do, you know, what the faith answer would be, or am I going to do what the culture answer would be?
Yep.
And for good TV, they go with the culture answer, right? And so that's how then it's like, okay, we get to this situation where like we would very clearly be like, oh, we've got to take that to Christ. But then their solution is, I'm going to go sleep with this other person to make myself feel better. And that's just like the diverging principles. And so I think that's where the line is drawn, where it's like, oh man, they're like dealing with all these real life things that are really interesting and like we actually feel and see on a daily basis. But then the way that they decide to like answer those questions, I think, is where the disconnect is.
Well, and that the when they get it right, and it's like beautiful, loving moments, reconciliation, like all this, forgiveness. I'm always like, where do you substantiate that?
Yeah. Again, they're one step away from Jesus. Why would you need to do that
if you? Yeah. I love all
belief system.
This has now become a podcast.
Sorry.
About Ted Lasso. But I do
never bring up.
I do love it because I'm just thinking about like. Also, what you're going to share coming up, you know, just in like that's a great conversation of even just like talking back about Ephesians, right? When Paul says like submit to one another out of reverence for Christ.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
I'm not going to want, when we hit that crossroads, to borrow your term, Josh, like I'm not going to want to go down that road naturally. I'm going to want to be
retaliatory.
It's hard.
It's not immediately satisfying.
Yes.
Yep.
And it doesn't, and depending upon your personality, it'll feel like we were just talking in my Wednesday small group about like, some people it's about a control issue. Other people it's about a justice issue. Like it'll feel like, well, if I go that way, they get away with something.
Yeah,
or if I go that way, I can't control.
You're like feeling like you're losing in the moment.
Yep.
Whereas the relationship is winning long term.
Yes.
Versus, now I feel like I'm winning in the moment, but everything else is losing further down the road.
Yeah, it was so funny for a season when I talked about that Houston fight this Sunday, or the fight outside the gas station on the way to Houston, and one of the things that came up when we were finally able to process that conversation, that big epic kind of moment, was if I was honest, I felt like God was trying to get me to just stop trying to fix dynamics and control and do and demand. And Sal said that he felt like God was saying, I just want you to focus on relationship and reconciliation, just relationship and reconciliation. And I think that it's funny because like we both needed each of those separate messages, right? Like, so in order to actually move into the kind of that new space. And I think again, like Josh, like you said, if you're not focused on relationship, like we're not, that it's not about winning, you winning. It's about you guys winning. It's about your team winning, bringing it full circle to Ted Lasso soccer team.
Yeah. Nice. I
right?
like it. That was,
you see?
Yeah.
Back on your team, Ted Lasso, real team player.
Yeah.
Yep.
I ever told you about my small group leader and his awesome transitions that he would do?
No.
So
I don't know if this is going to be real or not.
No, it's totally real. Anytime we'd get off topic, his name is Jeff Brown. Anytime we'd get off topic, he would say, speaking of the Longhorns, have you guys thought about what Paul says in Corinthians when he mentions this? And he would just turn. And every time it was like, oh, Jeff, you're so funny.
Yep.
But anyways, so... Okay, relationships. We're going to lean in. So, we've been doing these 5 handles to help us have great relationships. And part 5 really was what if we messed up the first 4 in some way? And the way we have kind of gone wrong in those first 4 has created greater implications in our relationships and our marriage and our dating life. And it's left us with broken scripts and stories and things that we left what do we do with those things? And so that's a lot of what part 5, is all about.
Yeah.
And I think it's helpful to note that because we're all broken people, so mostly all of us need part 5 to be a part of this series, to have that handle, because we are not going to perfectly get all the other 4 things done.
Yes, and even if it's not, I had someone mention to me, their marriage wasn't kind of their source of pain in terms of these love handle conversations, but they were specifically talking about a relationship they have with their as an adult with their parent, right? So everything in these 5 weeks can still be applied to, I don't think there's anything, obviously Jordan's message is a different dynamic, but when you start talking about communication, like he talked about the first time he shared, when Buck talked about, prioritizing your own spiritual, health, and then we talked about getting on each other's team, this transcends just marriage and relationship. We've all experienced brokenness in some capacity.
Yep.
And to figure out what it looks like to genuinely repair that and not bring that into the next thing is... One, because you just said, we've recognized that maybe in these last 4 weeks we've missed something. And I think that would be step 1. Because I don't know that everybody did. Maybe they listened to the 4 weeks before and they were like, oh yeah, I got all that.
Yeah, maybe.
I'm hoping most people realized, because there wasn't a week that went by that I didn't really check something that I could probably just improve on.
A lot of the handles are ideal principles to pursue, not necessarily destinations to arrive at.
Yeah. And you'll have to return to them over and over and over.
Keep checking on your soul. Keep learning how to communicate.
Yep. And it's an evolution. It has a process that it's going to go through. You're not going to arrive.
Right. So one of the things you talked about was when we bring old scripts into new relationship stories. And single people can do this as it relates to dating. I think divorced people can do this as it relates to a second or a third marriage. I think married people can do this, bringing old scripts of, previous seasons of their life into their marriage. And, once they have kids, all of a sudden, boom, things are popping up that were old scripts in their life that are no longer benefiting them today. So what there's a lot to talk about there, but what are the types of, what are the different types of old scripts that you see people bringing into their new stories?
So when I started talking to myself about this, for me, it was a work situation. I was taking dynamics with particular individuals, and it probably was a little easier for me because my work also involved a move, right? So I literally transplanted states, and I would recognize that I would attach a Tennessee person to a Texas person. And when I would do that, I'd be, oh, they're just like so-and-so.
Yeah.
And so, which wasn't always bad. Sometimes it was like, oh, because I have amazing relationships back in Tennessee that I miss some of those people and want to find my Texas version of them, right?
Yep.
But a lot of times it was negative, right? It was like, so I started a new job when I moved here, and I would quickly catch myself responding faster. So in other words, like if something happened or I had maybe a difference of opinion with a coworker in a new job, instead of waiting to see how that played out, because I don't really know them, and I would just be like, oh, it's going to go the way it went before, right? So I think whenever, and the same thing happens in conversations with my kids, same things happens in conversations with Sal. So whenever I find myself saying, here we go again, I think that's a trigger of like, okay, stop. Are we actually going again? Is this actually the thing that's happening? Have we given enough space for it to be different? I had a friend tell me once when a conversation I was having, Sal and I were early in marriage, and it was when I was still giving him all those devotions every Christmas, of all the ways that I wanted him to grow and him to be. And my friend so kindly just said, if he did all that, would you even have space for him to do it? But you're always running, trying to fix it and control it and contain it and dictate how it should go, because that's just part of my wiring. But you don't give enough breadth or space for people to grow and change. And so I think, one, you need to know you. Are you someone who is able to give people chances? And I know that just at the core of it, if you are someone who can give space for people to change and you believe and you have hope, and some personalities are glass half empty, right? And so, are you glass half empty or are you glass half full? So I think you got to know you and then hear the things that you say to yourself. Here we go again. That's just so-and-so. Well, he'll never change. People don't really change.
Men are always.
Men are always. Yes, the always statements, the never statements. Well, she's never gonna, and so I think when we do that, taking pause, and I think we're afraid to pause because, well, we might be wrong, and sometimes we get in a rhythm with somebody or with a story that we don't want a new story.
Yep.
We like fighting.
Yeah.
Like you want to be miserable, and I know that's like seems crazy, but let's be honest. Like, I can,
we all know people, we've met people, and it's like it seems like they just crave.
They want the drama.
Yeah.
They want and if I can get still enough to even reflect on different pockets of my life, there are some things that I have tried to change repeatedly in my life story. And it may not be necessarily my relationship with Sal, but like there's little pockets in which I've just gotten comfortable, and real change requires, nothing changes if nothing changes, right? Like we talked about on Sunday. And so change is hard. And so I think if you find yourself like, I'm comfortable. I want to believe that that's just how so-and-so is. I want to believe that every time I pick up the phone and call that person, that's just how it's going to be. I want to believe every day it's just going to be like the next, or everybody I meet is going to seem fine at first. They're going to seem great. Like I have several friends that are dating online or like trying to meet people online, and they're like, it always starts the same way.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay. And it always ends the same way. It's just like, talk about putting God in a box. And so I wish and I understand why we do it. It protects us. We run ahead of ourselves. Mm-hmm. Like we'd rather go ahead and know what's going to happen so we don't get as hurt.
Yeah.
But it's funny, you're still going to get hurt.
Yeah.
So I think making sure you're hearing what you're thinking, you're hearing what you're saying, what you're putting on people, the lens through which, let's say you're single and you're going out on a date again. If you've already told yourself this is going to be just like last time, like can you, before you get out of your car to meet that person, say, God, this is what I'm feeling. I'm feeling like here we go again. I'm feeling like this is just like going to be just like last time. Can you just take that from me? Can I just give that to you? Can I leave that here? And if I choose to pick it back up when I get back in the car, I can pick it back up. But can I go on this date and just see what might be? And I'll be honest with you, these are my fears about this date. These are my fears about trying this again. Here they are. Here's my thoughts. Here's my worries. Here's the things I want to control. But I'm just going to leave it here in this car, and I'm going to go on this date, and then I'll come back to you and talk to you. So I just think there's like little things. Same thing even like in approaching our kids, because I'm in like that teenage young adult season. It's like I am assuming I'm assuming every conversation I have with my kids, that's just them.
Yeah.
They're just never going to listen. It's just always going to go that way. And that's not fair to my kids. And the irony of this dynamic that we do with each other is we don't want anybody to do that to us. Like, I know, I think I've shared before, like Sal and I, with finances, were a big tension our first half of our marriage. And he has told me before, like, he just got to a point at which he was like, I'm just going to stop talking to her about it. And when he admitted that to me, like, man, I don't want to be that person that it doesn't matter what you say to me, that I can't change.
Yeah.
And so, I think most of us don't want to be that unless we really have a personality where we're just like, no, I don't have anything to work on and I don't have anything to change.
Yep.
I think we all want to be molded and I always say, like, get off the bus different than we got on.
Yeah.
But we need to afford others that grace and opportunity too. And I think so just check in your scripts, like every time you reapproach a financial conversation or you have that conversation Jordan challenged us to have, like, we're just going to go right back to how it was. It's like, well, if you keep saying that, you're for sure going to do it.
Yeah.
So, and you might, but you can just keep reapproaching and keep trying. I don't know if that's helpful. I don't even know that I answered your question.
Yeah, I think you did. It's a really broad question. I mean, there's all sorts of different types of old scripts that we bring into new stories.
Yeah.
In terms of relationships. And I think one of the things I heard you say, if I were to summarize it and formulate it in my own words, is like, don't ever find yourself in a new story at the same level of self-awareness that you were before.
Oh, I love that point. I don't feel like I said that at all, but I love that.
I feel like you said that. I just learned that from you.
So, I love that idea.
But if I was married and I'm going into a second marriage, let me make sure I'm at a greater level of self-awareness now than I was when that first marriage ended. Or same with relationships, things like that, right?
Yeah.
So.
I had at Inside Out this past Sunday, we were talking with the students. They had open Q&A, and one of their questions was essentially their version of how do I get more confidence and how do I show up more fully as myself.
Riz.
Yes, that's what it was.
More Riz.
The question was, how do I get more Riz? And which is really just kind of like your game or your ability to get flirted with or to engage people in terms of, But anyway, I told the students, I said, I'll make you a deal. I said, if you really work on you for 6 months, but you genuinely do it, and you become more self-aware, you have honest conversations with people. I even used your question. I was like, use Jeremy's question of like, what's it like on the other side of me across the board in your relationships, and you work for 6 months, I will put money on that you will have more Riz. And I had one student so far take me up on it. So I've got like this thing of like, which is funny, out of a room of a couple hundred or whatever we had. So, but like I really so firmly believe that if we can work on our self-awareness, and not in some like, I don't know, like new agey kind of like you do you way. I'm talking about putting in the work.
Yeah.
Like really spending time examining what it is like on the other side of you in every dynamic.
Yeah.
And where you want it to be like.
Yeah.
On the other side of you.
Yep.
I do genuinely believe if you put in that work, everything gets better. That doesn't mean everything gets easier. Doesn't avoid direct conversation.
Well, the work itself is not easy.
Yes. Yeah. And I just think that we get tripped up in the work, so we revert back to those old scripts. Well, I just can't. That's never going to change about me. I just am this person. Well,
it feels like, too, you can even apply this to different seasons of marriage. So, first getting married and then, you're at a certain level of self-awareness. By the time you have kids, you should be at a new level of self-awareness there. By the time you have your second kid, you should have learned a lot, processed a lot. Okay, here's what my first child revealed to me about me that I'm working on and I'm learning. And every step of the way, like up and to the right, should be our level of self-awareness as we kind of venture from season to season in all of our relationships.
Yeah, yeah. And even and reevaluating consistently, right? So even when I'm thinking about kids, you have to even approach them differently based on their seasons. Uh-huh. So Andy Stanley does this great job of like, you've got the discipline season, you've got the training season, the coaching season, speaking of Ted Lasso, the friend season, right? And so I think when my kids started going from like, I want to call it like when they were really sweet to when they were not as sweet. So, but I was going, they're trying to pull away because they're supposed to.
Yeah.
But I was interpreting, this is an old script into a new season, right? So I was interpreting every pull away as disrespect and disobedience. And it wasn't that there weren't moments of that. That's the other thing that will trick us with this old new script thing. Life will hand you just enough. And for me, that's like a spiritual warfare issue. But I know that, regardless of how you feel about that, the reality is life will hand you just enough to make you think it's true. right?
Yeah.
Like all those
Yeah.
insecurities get validated just enough to let them linger.
Yep.
And so, there were moments of disrespect and disobedience, right? But then I can't put, that wasn't all that there was. They were also trying to figure them out.
Yep.
They're like, I don't know who I am. I don't know, what I think or what I want to be or how I want to engage in the world. And I'm trying, there's this whole process, right? They're supposed to leave us. But when they start to pull away to leave and get independence, we bring the elementary script in with us. And
Yep.
we're like, no, you got to do what I say.
Yep.
It's like, yes, they do. But it's a different dynamic now.
Yeah.
And so I think that approaching even our marriages like that, like, the different season of like, hey, we can't be the same married couple with littles as we are same married couple with teenagers, as
Yeah.
we are same married couple empty nesters.
Yeah.
So having those meetings, even to have conversations around,
Yep.
like, okay, where are we?
Yep.
I think it was a couple weeks ago, you and I were talking about, you said you have like these buckets.
Mm-hmm.
And I've used that with people since of like, hey, like if you've got your buckets, what are your buckets?
Yeah.
And then are we touching base about where they are and are they healthy and where do I need to deposit more and where do I need to let go of some? And so
Yep.
I think constant evaluation will help you not bring old scripts into new things. I think catching old script, that's just so-and-so, all those kind of things that we tell ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah, I think another one, speaking of the buckets piece, is like, I think, what habits do I have now that were damaging to relationships previous?
Ooh.
And have I actually gotten rid of those habits or not? Or
Yeah.
have I implemented new habits that would have benefited previous relationships had they been there before?
Oh, yeah.
Like, I think sometimes I just think you can go as far as addiction, obviously.
Yeah.
That's like, that would break a relationship and you don't want to carry those same things into a new relationship. But even just, I'm thinking about like processes of being self-aware, emotionally healthy, mentally healthy, all the spiritual practices, things like that. Like if spirituality was not a part of a relationship before, I'm thinking of this as a guy, and there's a guy who's like, I'm going to go into another relationship and hope that spirituality is going to be better. I'm going to ask him, well, are you spending time with God every single day? Because if you're not, then it's probably not going to have a new story for you. It's probably going to be the same dynamic. And so like what habits have changed or should change or need to change, I think is another dynamic. And then also I think, is there anybody from your previous scripts that you don't want to talk to because you're afraid they're going to tell you not to go into this new script? I think is another, what I mean by that is like, I keep thinking of this story of this guy I met with recently, and I want to be careful just about how much I talk through with it. But basically it's like his previous relationship and how it unfolded and how it ended.
Okay.
He was beginning a new one the same way that he had begun his previous one, without addressing anything. So he was going into it.
So no different.
No different. And at the end of the conversation of us talking to him about it, and I'm trying to like, hey, definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over, expecting different results. Like, hey, there's some similarities here we got to look out for. At the end of it, I just asked him, have you talked to anybody else about this but me? And this was the first time we had talked in 2 years. And I said, have you talked to anybody else about this but me? And he said, no, I haven't. And I was like, oh, well, there it is again. Like, you cannot, be isolated.
Yep.
Like, and if you find yourself avoiding healthy people in your life because of what they're going to tell you, that should be a major red flag.
Yep.
That you're probably going to bring old scripts into new stories.
Yeah, if you don't have people in your life that will have say what you just said to your friend, right? Like, that's a healthy friendship. I had someone say to me once, like, I just want people, they were in a mentoring kind of relationship with me and a couple of other adults in our church, and he was like, I just want everybody to get off my back. And I was like, you don't.
Yeah.
Because when we get off your back, we stop trying. You don't want that.
Yeah.
You want people to push you, to challenge you. You want it with love and grace, and you want to trust them. That's not what, I'm not talking about like just random people telling you what you need to work on, but having those people in your life is one way to for sure avoid or be better at avoiding old scripts into new stories. Because we will do, and I think we don't think that we will be on autopilot.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that all those phrases that we use, you don't manage life will manage you. You don't manage your emotions will manage you. We will go, and we don't even know what our autopilot is.
Yeah.
And so, and I know we've joked a little bit about the Enneagram, but that was my favorite part about that tool, is it totally reveals your autopilot.
Yeah,
so if you want to know your old scripts, you could start there.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah,
it will
absolutely.
tell you, this is the script that convinces me that I need to behave this way.
Yep.
Because you will go into fight or flight, and that part of that won't look always like conflict or avoidance.
Right.
It might just look like I'm going to go to what I know to do and how I know to be.
Yep.
And I'll do that on autopilot.
Yep.
And then again, the world will give you just enough validation to keep doing it that way.
Yep.
And so you'll miss opportunities to grow and stretch. And it doesn't mean that the things, again, like with the old script idea, I mean, there's a lot of wisdom from knowing what I've walked through in the past. It doesn't mean that there's not any value in those stories. But if I just keep reading the same chapter in a book over and over and over and over, I don't actually get to see the plot unfold.
Yeah.
And I think I am maybe, but you're not.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. No, this is good. I'm glad we just spent time on this. We're almost out of time already.
Okay.
Maybe it's because we spent too much time talking about Ted Lasso in the beginning. But I do want to end on one thing. You said a quote that I think is just brings a lot of hope into this story for a lot of people who are listening. And it said, God needed to break what we were so we could step into what could be. It was a quote from a friend, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And I don't know, it's just as you think about people listening to this podcast or watching who have experienced brokenness in relationships, like what would just be your greatest hope or prayer for them as they think about stepping into what could be despite the brokenness that they've experienced?
I mean, I think, and this may be revealing of my personality or my temperament in general, is like we just view brokenness and woundedness and our hurt in such a way that I think is like, one, not beneficial, and then two, contradictory to what Scripture tells us to do with all that, right? Like we just are so pain avoidant as opposed to learning. And so I think, like, I know what hurts right now. I don't know for everybody, but I know in my life, I know what's hurting right now. I know the situations and the brokenness in my life. And there is that part of me that just wants to hurry up and get it done and that wants to just snap my fingers. But I won't learn what I need to learn. And I also won't be allowing space for the other people to experience what they need to experience.
Yeah.
Like if God waves a wand and it just gets better, no one really learns. And we're just going to return to it also. And the depth, there's this concept of like in friendship and all relationships where there's, it's shared identity and trust make all relationships, right? And the depth of those two columns in your foundation make everything. But trust comes from getting hurt and being able to get back together, right?
Yeah.
Like to be able to like skin our knees and we get back up.
Yeah.
And so I think like if someone is hurting for any reason, like don't wallow in it. I'm not saying like embrace the pain and just like drown in that, but I do think don't be angry at it and be open to what you can learn. And what if, and I love that Isaiah passage of like, I'm doing a new thing. But I think the reason I love the passage is because he says, don't you perceive it? So be willing to perceive what could be better.
Yeah.
And be willing to say, okay, this is for sure broken here, or this is hurting, or this is not, things aren't okay, but it can get better. And I can only do what I can do, but I can do things to walk in that direction. And then I can just trust and just know that we so often read these stories and hear these epic like Bible stories of people's journeys and what they walked through. And we read them in a paragraph, and sometimes it was days or weeks or months or years. So,
yeah.
And I think that we miss that. And so just know that God is always at work. One of my favorite quotes from a pastor I love, Richard Rohr, he's always like, God wastes nothing. Nothing is wasted with God.
Yeah.
And that's hard for us to believe when that nothing involves our brokenness and that hurt and that thing they did to us. And that thing they did to you could be super valid. I'm not diminishing that. But there can still be another story on the other side. But if you don't perceive it,
Yeah.
bringing that and asking God to help you perceive it might be a good start.
Yeah. And I think you would attest to this, and I would attest to this just in our own lives and brokenness, that we've experienced that. Like even painful seasons coming through, looking back, going,
Oh, yeah, I wouldn't trade it.
God, I wouldn't necessarily go back and wish that on someone else.
Yes.
But
And I don't want to repeat it necessarily.
no. But God did something
Yes.
that needed to be done in me.
Absolutely.
Because of that thing.
Absolutely. And I literally, when you're saying that, I have like 50 things that just flood my mind of God reminding me of like, which is why, when you read what he commands Israel to do through so much of the Old Testament is remember what I did when you thought you were wandering. Remember what I did when you thought you were lost. Remember what I did when you felt like you were in slavery. Remember what I did. Remember what I did. Remember. And I think that's that perceive it. And so you're going to have to get still.
Yeah.
And you're going to have to listen. But it's there. But if you don't want it to be there, it's not going to get forced on you. That kind of thing.
Yeah. And I'm realizing as we're having this conversation that there's just such a plethora of different broken experiences that people have been through. And so us talking through this can no way address some of the painful things people, especially if it's fresh right now, that people might be experiencing as they're watching and listening. And so I just want to give a couple of resources, because sometimes when you're stuck, you just need new information. But a podcast is not necessarily going to give you that new information. It's going to be more of a face-to-face conversation with an individual. And so if we were having coffee and, there's another person right here, they're saying help, I think what you and I would do is probably point them to a couple places that can be really helpful. One is just...
I would give them your number.
That's terrifying.
Everyone.
That's terrifying. That's a way to
or we could just give them Josh's number.
Yeah, Josh's number.
Everybody calls Josh.
Two specific places I'd point people towards if we were sitting down and they're like, where should I go? One is Center for Relational Care. It's a counseling center that we refer people to a lot.
You guys sent me there. When we first moved, we were really having a hard time as a family, and that's exactly where you sent us, and it was so good.
Sweet.
Yep,
awesome.
You did it.
There's an example right there.
Yes.
The other place this is more specific to married people or even divorced people who've experienced infidelity in their relationship. I would point them to affairrecovery.com. This is an amazing organization that we've referred people to before that have allowed people to just experience healing in their relationships and their marriages. So just another great resources for people who've experienced something like that too.
And you've got we've got a few community groups here, I think, that as they continue, or short-term groups maybe that pop up specifically around like Marriage Matters or Oasis and all these things. Like I think be attentive to that and reach out for those too. Yeah,
and there's Marriage Matters, there's Oasis, which is a divorce care group. There's also one called Holding Hope that's more based on, it's a women's group for women who've experienced trauma.
Okay.
Actually, I don't know if it's a women's group. Do you know if it's a women's group or not?
I feel like there's women in it.
Yes, there is women in it, but I
feel
don't
like
know.
I've met the women that lead it.
I think it is a women's group.
Okay.
But my point with that is sometimes when How's Our Soul is really, really hindered by trauma in our past, we have to deal with that stuff. So that's a group that can help kind of people do that and help understand what it looks like to bring those things to God. So just putting some resources out there. And if anybody's looking back for those resources again, we can put them in the description below.
Yep.
And if you're looking for just more stuff to explore, especially more counseling resources, go to mpaustin.com/what's next. There's a lot of information on there too.
Yeah.
So.
Yep.
So Jen, thank you.
Awesome.
For talking
I've had a
through
great
this.
5 weeks with you and Jordan last week. But
Yep. It's been fun.
It's been fun.
Yep.
Josh, you're gonna miss me.
Yes, I will. Where are you going somewhere?
No, I'm not going anywhere. I'm just saying we've had 5 weeks.
She's been on
of
the
this.
podcast.
You're on the podcast like every other week anyways.
Well, I'm
though.
just saying, like, you're just going to be like, what?
I know. It will be more boring.
Buck will be back and you'll be like, what?
I know.
So this coming week, we are introducing a new series called Investigating Jesus. And if someone is exploring Jesus, or maybe you know of a friend who's exploring Jesus, or maybe you have a millennial or Gen Z, Gen X son or daughter who walked away from faith, went to college. This is an amazing series and conversation to get us going kind of back at the core of what is Christianity all about. Yep. And I think it's helpful for people who call themselves followers of Jesus too, and just want to better understand why they believe the things that they do. So
absolutely. Can I just plug that, like, because I've read your notes. Like, I want to plug, like, as a mom of boys who are about to go to college, like, this is like, you want your seniors and juniors to be listening this series, because I think it's just good foundational stuff that when things kind of when questions get thrown at them, they won't be unfamiliar questions.
Sure.
Because I think that's part of the thing is, like, when we feel caught off guard in our faith and our understanding.
Yeah.
Like, it throws us off balance. It's like, no, these are okay.
Yeah.
And here's some evidence.
Yep. That's what it's going to be. So I'm really excited to start that conversation this week.
Yeah.
If you're out of town for spring break, make sure to watch online. We know Jen's not going to be out of town.
I'm not out
of town. But you can be there in person or watch online too. But anyways, thank you guys so much. It's been awesome to talk through all these different love handles.
Absolutely.
And we hope everybody listening has amazing relationships.
Thanks. And I never know how we end this. Every time I'm like, bye.
Awkward ending. That was it.
That's it.